إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. جزاك الله خير. So last week we finished off Babul Wakala, and this week inshallah we'll carry on with Babul Sharika wal Musaqa wal Muzara'a. And these four chapters, they've got something in common. That's why the Shaykh rahmatullahi alayhi mentioned them together, which is that they are connected to a partnership between two people or more. A partnership between two people or more. And that's why he included these, or he mentioned these three or four transactions together, or mu'amalat. So the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, Babu Sharika, the bab or the chapter to do with business partnerships. Sharika, business partnerships. And Sharika is when two or three people combine their wealth together or their effort together in order to obtain profit. When two or three or more people combine their wealth and their effort together in order to obtain a profit. So the Shaykh rahimahullah, he's going to mention in Babu Sharika, in partnerships, he's going to mention five different partnerships. Then he's going to mention two other partnerships, two other mu'amalat or dealings which are similar to partnerships. يقول الشيخ رحمه الله وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول الله تعالى أنا ثالث الشريكين ما لم يخن أحدهما صاحبه فإذا خانه خرجت من بينهما. So the Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم said that Allah جل وعلا said, and this is what is known as a hadith al-Qudsi. This is known as a hadith al-Qudsi. And the hadith al-Qudsi is higher than the hadith al-Nabawi, the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, lakin it is below the Quran. It is below the Quran. And it is different from the Quran in the sense that the hadith al-Qudsi can be sahih and da'if. The hadith al-Qudsi can be sahih and it can be da'if. Whereas the Quran is mutawatir. It's impossible for the Quran to be da'if. Also from the difference between the hadith al-Qudsi and the hadith al-Nabawi is that the hadith al-Qudsi is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The meaning is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And some scholars add that the wording is also from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Lakin with the hadith al-Nabawi, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the wording is from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and the meaning is from the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Lakin back to the difference between the Quran and the hadith al-Qudsi, although they're both from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the angle of authenticity, the Quran is authentic, mutawatir. Hadith al-Qudsi can be sahih, can be da'if. Secondly, the Hadith al-Qudsi cannot be read in salah. The Hadith al-Qudsi cannot be read in salah, lakin the Quran of Allah Jalla wa Ala must be read in salah. And salah is not valid, or one salah is not valid unless the kitab of Allah, the Quran, is read. Also, when a person is reading the kitab of Allah, he can intend to be rewarded. Alif, Lam, Mim, Harf. أو لا أقول ألف لام حرف لكن ألف حرف ولام حرف وميم حرف. So every harf that a person reads, a letter from the person that the person reads from the kitab of Allah, he'll be rewarded. Lakin that reward is not the same for the hadith al-Qudsi. على كل حال, the Shaykh mentions this hadith at the beginning of this chapter. The Shaykh rahimahullah, could the sisters please pass over some chairs? The Shaykh rahimahullah, he mentions this chapter, or he mentions this hadith at the beginning of the chapter, wallahu a'lam, lakin maybe to show the permissibility of a sharika. To show the permissibility of sharika. That's why straight after it he says, فَالشَّرِكَةُ بِجَمِيعِ أَنْوَاعِهَا كُلِّهَا جَائِزَةٌ. So sharika in all of its types, in all of its forms, it is wajib, the Shaykh says rahimahullah. So the hadith mentions that Allah Jalla wa Ala says that He is the third of two partners. If two partners get together for mu'amalat and dealings, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is their third one. for as long as, meaning that Allah is with them, supporting them and blessing their business and they're blessing their transactions and their business for them and supporting them. ما لم يخن أحدهما صاحبه, for as long as one of them does not deceive the other. فإذا خانه, لكن if one of them deceives the other, خرجت من بينهما, خرجت من بينهما. Then if one of them deceives or betrays his brother or his partner, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves them as they are. Now this hadith is easy to understand for the aqidah, for the aql of Ahlul Sunnah, it's easy to understand. Lakin the Ahl Bid'ah, the Mu'tazila and the Asha'ira, they'll have tafsirat or ta'wilat for this hadith. Also, what we benefit from this hadith is that a person can be harmful by him disobeying Allah Jalla wa Ala. He can also harm his family, his friends and his community. Where do we see that? Where do we benefit that from? The hadith shows us that a person, if he disobeys Allah Jalla wa Ala and he does that which he's not meant to do, then he can be a burden upon his friends, family and the wider community. Where do we see this, Muhammad?
Allah says, I depart from both of them.
Naam, Allah Jalla wa Ala leaves both of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves both of them. Although in the hadith what is mentioned, that only one of them deceives the other. Only one of them deceives the other. A similar scenario is that hadith where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam was about to come to the companions and tell them when Laylatul Qadr was. Laylatul Qadr, the Messenger was about to inform the companions when it was. Lakin, he came across sallallahu alaihi wasallam two men that were arguing. Then he forgot. So that is from the harms of disobeying Allah Jalla wa Ala. طيب. Write down these 5 types. The Shaykh will mention them and we'll study each one in detail. Lakin number 1 is called Sharikatul Inan. Sharikatul Inan. The first one is Sharikatul Inan. Sharikatul Al-Mudaraba. شركة الوجوه. So in summary, these are the 5 sharikats that the Shaykh rahimahullah will mention. The first one is Sharikat al-Inan or Inan. Sharikat al-Inan is when 2 partners put their money and their effort together. So mathalan they say, we're gonna open up a shop. One of them pays 50%, the other one pays 50%, and they both work in the shop. Sharikatul Mudaraba, we're going to study it, like in summary, it is when one of them has the wealth. One of them has the wealth. So he says, I'm going to open up a shop and you're going to work in the shop. And that's the agreement that they have. One has the money, the funds, and the other one works, does the physical labor. Sharikatul wujuh, yani from wajh, yani reputation. They don't actually have any money. Lakin they both go together and they borrow some money based on the honor and the reputation that they have amongst other business partners. So they don't necessarily have money to start off with. They don't have any capital. Lakin they go, based on their reputation, they get funds from some other parties. Sharikatul Abdan. Sharikatul Abdan is when none of them actually have capital money, lakin their physical labors, or they can physically work together. They're working together, hence al-abdan, badan, body. And Sharikatul Mufawada is all of these put together. Sharikatul Mufawada is all of those put together. So the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, فَالشَّرِكَةُ بِجَمِيعِ أَنْوَاعِهَا كُلِّهَا جَائِزَةٌ. فالشركة بجميع أنواعها. So that's the first mas'ala. He says بجميع أنواعها, in all of its types it is permissible. All of its types meaning these types. The Shaykh says it is permissible. Jaiz here has two meanings. Jaiz has two meanings. When we were talking about sulh, I believe it was, we said that sulh was sulh jaiz, it had two meanings. Who remembers those two meanings? 1, 2, 3. Who remembers those two meanings? Yeah. Permissible to do. Huh? It is? Do me a favor, tell them to turn that. Ask her again, please. Please, Abdullah. Yeah. So it is permissible and binding. Naam. Jaiz has two meanings. Meaning it is permissible, jaiz, يعني it is not muharram. You can do. And it is not wajib. It is not wajib upon you. And it is not mustahab. Meaning it is permissible for you to do. لك أن تفعل ولك أن تترك. You can do it and you can leave it. That is from the angle of taklifi, حكم taklifi or حكم وضعي. حكم taklifi as it relates to us. لكن حكم الوضعي, from another angle, when you're looking at the حكم of the وضعي, it is permissible, meaning it is not binding. Go on. Nafid, لكن also not binding upon the two people. Jaizul fasakhi. Remember that last week the contracts were of how many types? 3 types. What were they? Lazim min tarafain. Yani both parties must abide by the contract and they can't terminate the contract. Nikah, for example. And nikah ijar and so on. Renting out or nikah. You can't say after a few weeks, I want to terminate the contract. The second one was what? Jaiz min tarafain. And this is the type. It is permissible from both parties. It is permissible for both parties to leave off. And the third is what? Just as a recap. It is lazim from one taraf, binding from one angle and one side, and jaiz permissible from the other. So this type falls under, it is permissible for both parties to terminate the contract. So for example, if we get together and we want to open up a business, 3 of us, طيب? And then a few weeks later we find that we no longer want to carry on with the business transaction or the partnership. It's permissible for me and you and the third party to what? To say khalas, we call it quits, we call it a day. Is that understood? Lakin, the scholars, they exclude, or there's an exemption in when you want to terminate a contract, which is, that exemption is, unless a harm is going to befall this person. So for example, wakala last week, do you remember wakala? I say to Abdullah, I want you to sell my car for me. He's now what? A wakil, sah? I say to Abdullah, I want you to sell my car for me. Wakala, is it binding or is it not binding? It is not binding from how many angles? Both or one? Both sides. It is not binding. طيب. How about I say to Abdullah, okay, Abdullah, I want you to sell the car for me. And I'll give you a week to sell it, inshallah, and you'll get your reward. طيب. Abdullah travels, and we're living in London. He ends up in Birmingham. And he spent a week free. So he's been there for a whole week. He rented out a hotel, and he's travelled obviously to Birmingham, and he spent petrol. And then all of a sudden, a week and a half later, I say, Abdullah, I've changed my mind. Khalas, I don't want to sell the car anymore. Bring the car back to me. Is that permissible? That is permissible, lakin I have to reimburse Abdullah for his loss. I can't just say I'm going to terminate the contract. Why? Because he has spent petrol or a ticket to Birmingham. So he's spent time in a hotel. So he's used expenses. Therefore, there's a harm on his side if I terminate the contract. So that is not permissible. Likewise, another example that the scholars mention is Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Adha. Obviously, Eid al-Adha there's a demand for what? For animals, for sheep, صح? طيب. So if a certain businessman, so if a farmer مثلا, if a farmer brings 50 animals, 50 sheep to the city, and they are to be transported to Saudi Arabia مثلا, or they're to be used within the city, whatever city it may be. طيب? Because there's a high demand for udhiyah. And he gives the wakala to someone else. He gives the wakala to someone else. That person that he's now given it to, he's allowed to terminate the contract, صح? طيب. So this farmer gives it to him on the 5th of Dhul Hijjah, 3 days till Hajj, صح? And 10 days till Yawm al-Eid, 5 days till Yawm al-Eid. Then the person that he's the wakil, he comes back to him on the 15th of Eid, يعني on the 15th of Dhul Hijjah, meaning 5 days after Eid, and he goes, "La, Ya Ali, I terminated the contract. I didn't want to carry on with the transaction." Is that to be accepted? La. Why not? Huh? No, they didn't estimate a time though. Is that permissible for him to do? No, it's not permissible for him to do. He can't terminate it. Why? Because there's a harm that befalls the person, the farmer. Because there was a high demand on Eid al-Adha, and he didn't sell the animals on Eid al-Adha. He says, I on the 9th of the Hijjah, I thought I don't want to, on Yawm al-Arafah, I said, khalas, I don't have time, I want to celebrate Eid with my family, I don't want to sell your sheep. No, that's not permissible. Why? Because now he's been harmed. So على كل حال فالشركة بجميع أنواعها, it is جائز, it is permissible for both people to do, both parties, and it is also not binding for both. ويكون الملك فيها, the Shaykh says رحمه الله, ويكون الملك فيها والربح بحسب ما يتفقان عليه, and the ownership and the profit, it depends on what they agree upon, or what is considered the norm, whatever they agree upon, or whatever is considered the norm. For example, if the business that they want to open up costs 100,000, one of them pays 50,000 and another pays 50,000. That is a 50-50 partnership, صح? Right. So later on, when it comes to the profit, they're both going to what? Get 50-50 when it comes to the profit. Right. Or they can agree and say, listen, yes, for the capital or initial starting up, we're going 50-50s. Lakin, later on, inshallah, when it comes to the profit, I take 70 or you take 70 and I take 30. That is also permissible, depending on what they agree upon. Number one, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Al-Muslimuna ala shurutihim." The Muslims are upon their shurut. They fulfilled the shurut and the oath that they took, firstly. Secondly, it may be that the one that's getting 70%, he might actually be working in the store, or he may have more knowledge and more experience of how to do business. So that in that first one is only giving the money, the capital, the starting off, but he's not really doing much when it comes to the day-to-day running of the business. So the Shaykh says the ownership and the ribh depends on ما يتفقان عليه, whatever they agree upon, or whatever is considered the norm. طيب. The Shaykh then says رحمه الله إذا كان جزءا مشاعا معلوما, لكن it has to be, the profit has to be a specific portion that is known. It has to be a joint portion that is known, meaning the profit. So مثلا you can say that from the profit I take 2/3 and you take 1/3, or I take half and you take half, or I take 70% of the profit and you take 30% of the profit. It has to be a percentage like that. It is not permissible to say, right, I'm going to get I'm going to get £200,000 out of the profit. £200,000 is mine and the rest is yours. That is not permissible. Or to say, I'm going to take 50,000 of the profit, but you're going to take what? Whatever is left. That is not permissible. Why is that not permissible? Naam, there's gharar in there. Who can explain further? Why is that not permissible? Meaning, I'm going to get 50,000 of the profit and you're going to get whatever's left. Naam, it has to be juz' ma'ruf. That's what Shaykh Sa'di says, rahimahullah. Lakin we want to give a ta'leel. Why? We want to know why did Shaykh Abdurrahman Sa'di say this. You may not make other. You can only maybe you'll make 50,000. Maybe you'll make 50,000. So if we agree at the beginning that I'm going to take 50,000 and you're going to take whatever is left over, maybe nothing is left over. That's definitely going to cause disputes, right? Like, what about if we say I'm going to take 50,000 and you take the rest, and the profit was 500,000? He's going to take how much? 450,000. Do you think I'm going to be happy with that? Normally, no. So it has to be something which is known. It has to be something which is known. Also, what you can't say is, right, I'm going to take the profit for this sale. This season, I'm going to take the profit, the winter season, and for the summer season, whatever profit you make, then you take as well. Or whatever profit we make, then you take. That is not permissible. Why? Again, there's ambiguity, there's gharar involved, there's jahala. We may not make as much in the summer as the winter. Mathalan here, in the winter, what do people have? They have the holiday season sales. Sah? Boxing Day sales. So la shak, no doubt that a person who has a shop during this time is going to earn more money and more profit than a few months later, a few months down the line, or the profit that they would make in summer. So it has to be an amount that is known. There's a qa'idah that I want you to write down for a sharika, which helps understand sharika, which is أن الأصل the asl أن الأصل التساوي في المغنم والمغرم في المغنم والمغرم. I'll explain it.